and welcome to Authors Revealed. My name is Ashley Brooker, and I'm your host today. We're going to be speaking about John Updike and his life and works. I've brought along a couple guests, so we'll be introducing those later. First, we're going to talk about his accomplishments as an author. He became the youngest person to ever be elected to the National Institute of Arts and Letters, and he also earned 2 Time magazine covers for his works. He received 2 Pulitzer Prize awards, one for Rabbit is Rich and the other one for Rabbit at Rest. Later we'll be speaking about Rabbit Run, which is his most famous piece and spans over several books. He received the National Medal of Art from President George H.W. Bush and also the National Medal for the Humanities from George W. Bush. Very few people have received both awards. He's one of the few. Since he was such an accomplished author, we've asked a Pennsylvania native, Jeremy Horn, to come visit and talk about his life and a little bit about his work. Welcome, Jeremy.
Thanks, Ashley. So
can you tell us a little bit about his life?
Yes, John Updike was born March 18th, 1932 in Reading, Pennsylvania, and was an only child. His parents and him lived with his grandparents until he was 13 years old when they moved to his mother's birthplace, a stone farmhouse on 80 acres about 11 miles from Shillington, Pennsylvania.
So when did he start his writing? What really got the ball rolling, so to speak?
I'd have to say that was his mother. She was always writing little short stories, reading to him. She also encouraged him to draw and express himself as much as possible. He actually attended Harvard Harvard on a tuition scholarship, and he graduated summa cum laude in 1954. While he was there, he worked and was later president of the Harvard Lampoon. In the same year he graduated, he sold his first short story to the New Yorker magazine, as well as a couple poems. He also met his wife, Mary E. Pennington, while he was there.
What did he do after he attended Harvard?
After attending Harvard and graduating from there, Updike and his wife, Mary, moved to England, where he studied art, and they had their first daughter. While he was there, he met several writers for the New York Times, or the New Yorker, and developed many connections that he would later use. He actually worked for the New Yorker for a period of 2 years before he moved his growing family to Ipswich, Massachusetts.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I understand he had a lifelong relationship with the New Yorker. Is that correct?
Yes, he did. He constantly was sending stories to the New Yorker, and he had a pretty normal life. There was a couple bumps in the road. In 1974, Updike and his wife Mary separated. He then moved to Boston to teach for a short time. In 1977, he met and married Martha Ruggles Bernard and moved to Georgetown, Massachusetts with her and her 3 daughters.
What inspired his writing?
I'd say that his life experiences inspired his writing. He wrote about the mundane, or some would call it the mundane. He liked to capture everyday life and talk about its problems. He once wrote that sex, art, and religion are the 3 great secrets of the human experience. These tended to be some of his main topics, no matter what genre he was writing in. The fact that his first father-in-law as well as his grandfather were both ministers could also help explain his preoccupation with philosophical questions.
I understand he died recently. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, John Updike spent the last years of his life in Beverly Farms, Massachusetts, in the part of the country he loved so much and where so much of his fiction was set. He continued to write, love, and live, and died January 27, 2009, of lung cancer at the age of 76.
And I know I discussed earlier that he was an accomplished writer, but can you tell us a little bit more about his actual writing?
Yes, Updike published his first book of poetry, The Carpentered Hen and Other Tame Creatures, with Harper Brothers in 1958. But when they wanted to change the ending of his first novel, The Poorhouse Fare, he moved to Alfred A. Knopf Incorporated. He had a very clear idea of what he wanted his stories to say and didn't take kindly to other people telling him what to write. The Poorhouse Fare was well received and gave him the courage to take on more ambitious projects. His next novel would be one of his most famous and would give him the reputation as one of the leading authors of his generations, Rabbit Run.
Well, Jeremy, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to come to Warrensburg, Missouri to talk about John Updike. I really appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ashley.
Our next guest is going to be Eric Timmons, and he is coming from the Kansas City Star. He's a critical writer about authors, and he's going to be speaking about Rabbit Run. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Ashley. Yes, Rabbit Run, as Jeremy mentioned, it was one of his most famous novels, and it was also one of his most offensive and disturbing. He was very graphic sexually, and one of the most disturbing parts of this book is when his young infant child dies, and that was very disturbing to some people. But to tell you a little bit about the book, Rabbit, a nickname for Harry Angstrom, is a 26-year-old, and he was a former high school basketball star. That was his life. That's all he knew up until he graduated from high school. He was just awesome at it. And after he graduated, he didn't know what to do. Basketball was all he knew, and he thought about the glory days, so to speak, a lot. And one of the important parts of the books is he has an affair with a woman and gets her pregnant, but he doesn't know this yet. And his wife, at about the same time, becomes pregnant, and his wife gives birth to this child. And she's an alcoholic, and she was giving the child a bath. I already said this, and drowned. And it was very hard for Rabbit. And about this same time, he finds out that this other child from this woman he had an affair with was his child. Very disturbing book, very depressing. And, it was kind of it was kind of opposite of what John Updike was about, his life. And
You could say Rabbit was his alter ego? Is
yeah,
that safe
you
to
could
say?
say that. You could say that. And but of course, later on, Updike did have some bumps in the road. He got divorced and all that stuff, and that's Rabbit Run.
So Updike used some of his own experiences in the story, but used more details that were graphic.
He
and
changed
dark.
it around so it was more dark and disturbing. And Jeremy mentioned that he did use a lot of sex in his writing, and they would use analogies with basketball and sports. And if you think about it, basketball and sex, you could probably use your imagination and think of some analogies for that. But he was a very interesting writer. I do rip on Rabbit Run a little bit, and disturbing, but all in all, he was a great writer.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, that concludes our show today on John Updike, and I hope you are going to view our next show on our next author. It should be coming up soon. Thank you very much.